Hey there, folks. I'm Chris Burkhardt, president and founder of Placers. We consider ourselves coach to the workforce. If a sports star or an actor can have them, so can a mere mortal. The world of work is so complicated more than ever today, and we help folks navigate their job search process, and we put them to work. Hey, and if workers need coaches, those same challenges exist with our customers, so we consult with companies to help them hire the best talent or leverage talent. This is our How We Solve Problems series. It's short form where we really just answer questions and provide input on the problems we solve for customers. I'm here with Brian Saleo. He is our solutions czar, director of strategic accounts. He's lawyer, consultant, trainer, leader, and he oversees 100% of Placers customers. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you, Chris. Glad to be here and glad to talk about my favorite topic, which is how companies can solve problems.
I appreciate the way you put that. So we're coming out of the pandemic a little bit. There's this discussion of a vaccine spring. We all have some optimism that's building. And one thing we're hearing from plant managers, talent acquisition people, human resources people, and it goes something like this. We've been able to manage our hiring during the pandemic. Let's say we hire 3 people or 30 a month, and we're doing just fine. But I'm hearing rumbles, or I'm starting to go to meetings where that number is going to, let's say if it is 3, they're going to hire 30 a month. And what we thought made sense is to talk about, with the solutions czar, what are all the options that someone should be considering to ramp up when you're talking about going from 3 to 30 hires in a month. So I don't know if that sets you up for success, but Brian, why don't you get us started with a little dialogue on that?
Sure. So, a lot of it depends on what type of hiring they're looking to do, whether it's going to be temp to perm, or direct. So I like to say that this is definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation. Companies are in all kinds of different scenarios where a customer has put a huge order in with them, and that's created a significant need. Or, we're even seeing customers that make products related to the pandemic, like PPEs or packaging for the coronavirus vaccine and things like that. And that creates a demand that they had no way of predicting 6 months ago. If you think back, just this time last year, we weren't even thinking about a lot of this stuff. And those are just 2 examples of things that can happen during a ramp up period for a company. So
this demand that comes about, somebody sells something unique happens. And yeah, they're walking into a meeting and all of a sudden it's this huge success. The strategy happens, but they're left with this people dilemma. Let me back you up just a second, because you're so accustomed to doing this. I think the first problem that I'd be curious about is you said, well, a firm simply has to decide whether they use a temporary associate, whether they have some conversion program, maybe they add to their own headcount, or they use freelance workers. How the heck does someone sort through that?
So I think it depends on the end game, right? So, is this something where you need people for a 6-month period and there's no way that you're going to keep any of them at the end of that 6 months? Or is it something where you're going to hire 30 people over the next 30 days and do that for 4 months? And at the end of that time, maybe you're going to keep half of them and let them go because you do see a long-term need for your company to add staff, but not necessarily at the clip you're going to have to add it in order to meet the immediate need. Or is this something where you're going to keep as many of the people as possible, that these are long-term hires that your company has just, landed a new product that's going to continue in production for years and years and years, and you're just faced with a situation where you need to hire a whole bunch of people, but those are people that are going to be long-term committed to your company. It really depends on which one of those options you're dealing with. I personally love the temp to perm model because it's kind of, try before you buy. And we talked about that a little bit last week. I think in almost any case, when you bring on contingent workers, there's a decent chance that if somebody shines among the group, you're going to keep them. So I think every temp engagement's a little temp to perm. But to answer your question, it really depends on what's the end goal for your company. Where do you see yourself in 6 months, a year, 3 years, in terms of the staff you're going to need, and that kind of dictates what your hiring method should be now.
So we kind of joke sometimes, being in the industry, like that, having a workforce plan, a workforce strategy, it's like the Holy Grail. Like what you just said is so simple, and it's so hard for, if you're in the spot of talent acquisition or human resources, you've got to go sort of get leaders to think this way when all they want's the product out the door because they're making vaccine packaging, right? So it's always an interesting one.
So it's like the Holy Grail, but it's also the hot potato, because there's always a debate about, is this something procurement owns? Is this something talent acquisition owns? Is this something that, you're going to have a vendor management division that's going to handle? Do you have a dedicated contingent workforce planning group? So who exactly owns it is always a big question, because that's also going to dictate what direction the solution goes in a lot of cases.
Any advice you'd have for somebody that's sort of facing off for that for the first time? Do you get people together and talk about it? Do you choose a simple path? What would you suggest to somebody?
So this probably isn't going to be the rocket science answer you're hoping for, but I think every time you try and solve a problem as a company, you're better off getting input from all of the key stakeholders, letting them all have a sense of ownership in the solution, and then you're going to get buy-in for a long-term solution to the situation you're trying to solve. So the best examples I've seen of really working through this well is where somebody really owns the idea of a workforce strategy, and then gets the buy-in of HR, talent acquisition, procurement, whoever it might be, so that they're all coming together with a solution that they all can stand behind.
It makes a ton of sense to me. All right, so our big problem that we want to talk a little bit about is, a business finds themselves really, in essence, ramping up and needing to hire roughly 10 times what they've been. The example I used is they were hiring 3 people just fine during pandemic. They come out of a meeting, and now the run rate looks like 30 a month for as long as as they can see. And you and I know that changes, but the optimism is coming back, and they've got to get that product out the door. I know someone's got a lot of choices if they're considering using a third party to help them. What would, use your expertise and tell some stories. What do you think someone's couple of options might be if they were facing that 10x ramp up?
So I think a lot of it goes to how involved you want your own team to be in the solution, because that kind of, starts us down a path. We say we come to the customer with a blank sheet of paper as far as our solutions go. First questions I want to get answers to is, what does your current team look like that's going to be responsible for putting this solution together? Do you have a talent acquisition team with dedicated recruiters? What is their typical hiring volume that they're used to? If they have the internal resources available to handle the onslaught of candidates they're about to get, then just doing a standard temp model or doing a direct hire model where you're just submitting candidates and working it out that way could be perfectly effective. A lot of companies that we see, they're used to that 2 or 3 people at a time hiring, and, a small, even part-time talent acquisition team can handle that much of the responsibility. Smaller companies, you'll see somebody who serves as the office manager, accounts payable, talent acquisition, and human resources all in one person. So then they're faced with this, and they're like, holy cow, what the heck do I do now? So, that's where some of the solutions get involved, where we are a little more involved in it. So they're going to turn over a little bit more of the process to us. So typically that's going to be with us complementing or being an outsourced provider of recruiting services for them.
All right. So I'm curious, are you finding when you talk to a lot of customers that they have capacity right now for talent acquisition and recruiting? You'd think that coming off pandemic that people are running lean, but maybe they kept some folks and had them doing projects?
No, I'm seeing that it's really lean.
Okay.
Unfortunately, when you're going to go into a time frame of uncertainty and maybe a little less productivity, unfortunately, a lot of the people that were impacted by that are the people who are directly responsible for hiring, because it's going to slow down or stop. So a lot of talent acquisition and HR teams out in the market are operating very lean right now. And so, that creates a situation where there are talented people out in the market that unfortunately were downsized during the pandemic in the talent acquisition field or HR. And companies on the other side of the coin are kind of operating lean because they didn't really need those resources. And now they might be faced with a situation where, they're not even just going to be hiring at the clip that they were before, but it's going to be 10 times because of some factor in their business.
Well, there's a little bit of a glimmer of hope in that there's a thought, there's a weird kind of thought that unemployment may go up a little bit. And that's kind of a good thing because that means that the folks that have been sitting on the sidelines are now re-entering the job market, that they have a little less frustration, or maybe their kids went back to school, so they have the ability to look for work again. So at least for a little bit, there's going to be a reemergence of a little bit of talent this spring, perhaps re-entering the marketplace. But back to your thinking, I'm going to hire 10x the people for the next few months. What else could I do?
So I guess one of the things that I really like for companies like that is if they know that it's going to be a short-term type of ramp up, just as we put contingent workers to work all the time with our customers to make widgets or make products or work in an accounting department, we also place recruiters. So we have a network of recruiters, people who work with us today or have worked with us in the past, people that we've vetted, that we've trained, that we know do things the Placer's way, as we like to call it. And what we can do is put one of those individuals on site. And I'm using that term with quotes all the time now because not everybody's on site. But basically, they're an extension of our customers' talent acquisition team. So even though they're on our payroll, they're taking direction using the tools that a customer has for tracking candidates and things like that. So we provide that type of talent to our customers, and it's something that could go on for 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years. It just really depends on the model. But we take some of the strongest recruiters out there, put them with our customers, and they work for the customers, meeting those needs. And then when the need's over, that person could come back to us, and oftentimes we just put them right out onto another assignment doing the same type of work with us.
We'll redeploy them to somebody else who has the next ramp up.
Exactly.
All right. So that's a really interesting thought. But, I certainly hear about and pay attention that almost every part of the org chart is now open to freelance temp contract. So it makes sense that it would happen with a recruiter. How does Placers add value to that? Why don't I just go find my own recruiting temp? Like, how do we make it better?
So, number one, we're good at it. We understand the recruiting business. A lot of our customers aren't in the recruiting business, obviously. So knowing where and how to find that talent, making sure that the talent is somebody that can do an effective job, that's something that we specialize in. Secondly, you can bring that recruiter on, but if you're going to bring them on as a contractor, they could work directly for a period of time. But what's nice about more of what we call the recruiter on demand model, which is what I'm describing here, is that talent acquisition consultant is really part of our team as well. So we'll support that individual with the tools that we have for finding talent, whether it's job boards, relationships with departments of labor or whatever resources out there that we've tapped. They'll have the support of additional recruiters on our team. If we need to provide them with additional talent, we can supplement it that way. The individuals can be on site or not on site, depending on what your needs are. So it's really an effective model where you're not making the investment in a long-term solution, but you've got an expert coming in. I mean, just thinking about, when you're an individual and you file your taxes each year, you could do it yourself for sure. But if you want to have something done by somebody who knows the situation a little bit better, you certainly are going to go to your accountant and make sure that they do your taxes for you. It's the same thing.
So we wanted this series to be nothing but value laden for customers, a different way to consume and ask questions. I think it's unusual for a staffing firm or agency to have this recruiter on demand expertise. I've heard you, when we're not recording, I've heard you talk about how clients have said they've asked for this service and that, other firms say, I don't know how to do it, or it's not our specialty. Any thoughts on that? I don't mean to, look for the compliment for placers here, but perhaps you have a comment or two on how we've overcome that and why we have this expertise.
Well, I think it's something we've focused on, first of all. I mean, most companies just don't have it as a product offering. They kind of have their cookie cutter solutions that they come in with. And so doing something like this that's a little bit, out of the ordinary, just isn't an area that they specialize in. I think the other thing is, we have a lot of experienced folks at placers. We've all built up pretty extensive networks over the years. I know that in a recent situation, I needed 2 recruiters urgently that could sit anywhere in the country. And I was able to call on 2 former colleagues that I respect the heck out of and see if they were available. Turns out they were, and they're both going to work for one of our biggest customers. So we've got all of us at placers here have that kind of network from places we've been in the past, or even places, people we've connected with while with placers. So by having that network, it really allows us to leverage that when an urgent need comes up, and we can usually respond 3 to 4 days at the most. We could probably have somebody there ready to work for you.
I'm not sure if the ancient history of kind of where this product came from is interesting to our audience, but I can tell you this. The whole idea of doing a little a talking piece about the problems we solve. I remember in the early 90s where placers, and my father, Alan Burkhardt, ran the business at that time, all of our core customers, where we had 50 to 1,000 temps, they had long since asked for having somebody on site as like an HR person to manage the workforce. But they started to say, could we rent placers recruiters? And the funny thing is, Brian, we were like, no, we don't do that. And then, but if you really just think about if that's a problem that a customer has, I remember the first couple, Brian, we just sent them, just use them, and our people liked it. They learned things and we got work done. And then after a while, customers felt weird about that, and we figured out how to charge for it. What's so interesting is all of that is a part of what is the RPO market today, this concept of using recruiters. And it was red hot years ago. And I honestly think that it is a very relevant solution when you're coming off the backside of a recession. Next couple of years, use a recruiter during your ramp up, and then you look up and you don't need that headcount. Terrific way to solve that problem.
Well, Chris, you're fortunate that you've been around long enough to see a lot of downturns in the economy, and you were coming up with these types of solutions when I was still in high school wearing Motley Crue T-shirts and Air Jordans. So, you've been doing this a long time. I know you've had some examples. Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the times that you've been able to help companies ramp up with a need like this?
Well, I'm happy to do it. Probably the biggest example I can think of is we were working with a regional CPA firm, and they did something so fascinating. They were starting to serve global CPA firms and provide talent. And that they started providing that talent to the Fortune 1000. And one day, the firm was genius. They made the decision to serve the Big Four versus compete with them. And on the back of that partnership, they needed to grow by 4, 5, 6, 700 CPAs. And Placer's predecessor, our company, we actually deployed 17 recruiters to help hire those 600 people. And like you said, that on-site, off-site, virtual, 4 were on-site, 4 were in our office, 3 were remote, a couple were hybrid, several traveled into the markets where they were doing it. And it was it was a successful project. We were embedded in that, but we helped them hire those 600 CPAs. It was during that Sarbanes-Oxley era where if you had a CPA, you were gold. It didn't matter. Like you were special, and you still are if you're in that field. But they're not all like that. Sometimes they're with a healthcare unit that's in a remote rural area, and they need to hire a bunch of rad techs or respiratory therapists, and their core team doesn't have it. So we would send people there and, stay in stay in that market and help them for 6 months to maybe reduce the cost of very expensive per diem or travel nurses or travel allied health. And there was a really great thing we could do where we could save them money. They'd stop using, ironically, we'd help them stop using contractors in allied health by using a contracted recruiter. But there's usually a pretty good return on those things. I think it's not a great solution forever unless you got a really big talent acquisition team. And it makes a ton of sense because then when things slow down, and it happens to us, the Placers recruiters come back, and luckily we always find something else for them to do. But I could go on and on. But we've opened hospitals out of market. We've helped small businesses ramp up, and certainly big stories. And obviously there's a lot of work in all that. But if someone's facing a ramp up, this is a really great way to approach it. And actually, I'm going to tease everybody. I think next time we ought to talk about, maybe the big brother of Recruiter on Demand, and talk about Total Talent Solutions, talk about the acronym RPO, and if someone's really serious about outsourcing, what might be involved with that. Any last and final, Brian?
I was just thinking a couple of things. One is your example reminded me of something we did just with a customer down the shore last year down in southern Delaware. There's obviously in that whole resort industry, there is a very busy season during the summertime. And one of the things that's nice about Recruiter on Demand is it's really can be boots on the streets type recruiting, what we call it. In order to be successful with that, we had people that were walking the boardwalk, handing out flyers. We had people walking around with iPads, interviewing people on the spot and getting them into consideration. We put a lot of people to work last year just by having 2 recruiters deployed, bringing those people on and meeting a need that a customer wasn't able to meet on their own, knowing that that customer was not going to have those needs beyond late August or September. So it's a great example of one way that can really work. And the other thought I had was I was thinking, one of the other huge benefits of this is we do a lot of reporting. We track a lot of different things, time to fill, number of candidates presented versus number hired, all those different things. And that reporting is something that we include with Recruiter on Demand. You're going to have an account manager who's assigned to it that's going to be working right alongside with you to identify the little things as you go along, but you're also going to get monthly or biweekly reporting or on the overall project on, how did we do? Of the 300 candidates presented, how many got hired and how many are working out and stuck with you for more than 30 days and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of metrics and things like that go into that our tools and experience can allow.
My dad always said if someone were going to trust us to outsource something, they better be able to see very quickly what we're doing and what it costs. So it does make a ton of sense. And then I guess my last and final would be, you were talking about the resort scenario at the beaches, and I think it's not uncommon for our customers to have terrific brands, you know, and maybe they do a pretty good job of advertising, or they've spent some money to generate an applicant flow. But it is not uncommon for somebody to be great getting widgets out the door or be a great place to spend the summer, but it doesn't mean they're great at talent acquisition.
Sure.
So you've got great. So I know what we did there. We helped them maximize the talent that was applying. And of course, we used our own stuff too. But there's no harm, no foul in having the expert come in and help maximize the assets you already have.
Exactly.
All right. So we'll be doing this each week. You know, feel free. I did get a couple of emails and suggestions that point in this direction. Let us know what problems you're facing with talent acquisition and thinking of using, you know, an agency or staffing firm to solve your problems. And we'll keep trying to do this in an outside-in way. Here's to next time.